Well, some controversy has been brewing over the last, 24 hours since a statement was issued by the Attorney General's Department. It has to do with the banks that collapsed and the prosecutions that were started by the previous administration. We know that the Attorney General's office has now gone to court and filed a nolle prosequi, which basically says that they are no longer interested in pursuing the trial, the prosecution of Dr. Kwabena Duffuor and 7 others. They're no longer interested. And as you know, he is a former finance minister, he's a BOG governor, but he also owned Unibank, a large bank of the time that the previous government insisted was not doing well. The accusation was that they were also misusing state funds given to them to try and keep the bank afloat. And so they took him and 7 others to court, and the prosecution started on the matter. But as we now know, on the back of a statement that the Attorney General's office issued, that case is no longer one that the Attorney General plans to prosecute. That has led a fair bit of controversy, with a lot of questions being asked. We learned a bit more detail in that statement, though. So what really is the basis of the discontinuation of this particular case? The Attorney General explains that together with other state agencies, they came to an understanding that if the state can recover at least 60% of what was allegedly stolen, because remember, nothing has been proven in this case just yet, because the trial is yet to come to conclusion, if they can establish and recover at least 60% of what was lost to the state in the huge losses that we saw these banks impose on all of us, and the taxpayers did pay for it. If they can recover that, then the decision then will be that in some specific instances, so this is not all cases as far as the banking sector crisis was concerned, but in some specific instances, they will discontinue, they will reconsider the prosecution. So the conclusion then was that in the case of Dr. Kwabena Duffuor and the 7 others, the state managed to recover 60% of what was lost. And so the decision then had been taken on the back of that threshold being met, that this case would no longer, this trial would no longer go forward. Now, a few questions civil society have asked since this became public. The Attorney General issued a statement. One is, okay, so how much exactly are we talking about when we say 60%? That's one question that has been asked. Second question is, so the 40%, what happens to it? Third question, does that mean that those accused in this particular case have admitted their guilt, right? But then also, what bigger signals does this send? So, very fundamental questions being asked on the back of this. But one thing you must also note, that in the cases of nolle prosequi, the Attorney General is not obliged to explain to anybody while they will file a case in court to discontinue a prosecution that is ongoing. The Attorney Generals in the past have not done so. Even under very controversial circumstances, they choose not to do so. And civil society organizations and persons who are activists and have been demanding good governance have always campaigned that we should change that practice, because we need to understand, because the Attorney General is operating on our behalf. And if you choose not to prosecute a case that has been started, you must tell us why. And Attorney Generals in the past have resisted that call. So we're seeing, for the first time, this explanation from an Attorney General, and is it the first time or not? We'll try and get my guests to weigh in on that. At least we're seeing this Attorney General decide that, yes, he will now explain to us why he's taking this step. Further to this, we also understand that the Attorney General will be addressing the press, will address the country, to try and again explain this a bit more. At that point, we can get to ask him a few additional questions, so it gives us clarity. So at least there's some transparency part of this, which we are now getting to know of. One nolle prosequi, now a subject of Attorney General's explanation. It's going to be a subject of a press conference. Journalists will ask him the question, and then he can explain. Okay. But Should that be enough to excuse the questions that the civil society players are asking? We'll get into that when my guests sit for a conversation on this. But there were two main objectives for the Attorney General's Department, and I'm talking about Attorney General's Department under Godfrey Dame and the previous administration, because they started these prosecutions. And as you know, Atuasian was jailed as part of this. They wanted to do two things. One, to ensure accountability for public funds that were used. Because, liquidity support came from the Bank of Ghana to some of these banks that allegedly were misused, correct? And that is state funds. The second thing they wanted to do was to recover lost state money. So one, accountability, and two, if anything was lost, let's recover it. So those were the two main objectives, right? And this AG obviously had looked at the cases in court and decided in this particular instance, they don't want to continue because they've recovered. They've met a threshold of 60%. So that is just the background to this. So who are the individuals involved? There's Kwabena. Before you know him, I've just mentioned earlier, he's a key figure in this. He's the owner of Unibank, a former finance minister, BOG governor, etc. His son also is involved. You have Johnson Siama, that, again, a very interesting case of Dr. Siama himself, who the BOG governor himself was involved in that also. And then we have Echo Deterrence. And you also have the other individuals, LC, Jeffrey Amon, Kojo Pokuako, and Benjamin Ofori. All of them now, that case has been discontinued against them. So again, the question is, so who really is making the payments as far as the 60% is concerned? Because it is a huge figure. This is 5.7 billion in total. That's what we are talking about. That is what the state was attempting to recover from them. That's why they were being prosecuted, right? And this is the allegation. It's not proving just yet. So 60% of that then gives you 3.4 billion that the Attorney General says has been recovered. And then you were left with 2.28 billion that, as we now know, will be foregone. The state says, well, it's okay. We'll move on. We would, counting our losses, it's okay. We'll cut the losses here and go with 60%, coming down to 3.4 billion. So that is the state's rationalization for the decision that has been taken. Now, at the height of the banking sector crisis, 420 licenses were revoked, really across the board. It was really the financial sector issue. And then we were told at the time that when everything is said and done, we're talking about some 30.3 billion that we have to spend to try and clean this up between 2017 and 2024, right? And the banks now, some of them, the financial sector recovery levy then was put in place for the banks to pay. 2.13 billion has now come in, trying to, again, show up on the back of the spending that the state had to do. The previous government had told that as part of the reason why the economy tanked was because of all the monies that were spent here. Part of it was because of this. The NEC itself, in their 2025 manifesto, 2024 manifesto for the 2024 elections, had made this point that they wanted to launch a forensic audit into the collapse of these indigenous banks and financial institutions. The current president is on record to have said that they will consider on the back of this whether or not these licenses should be restored, right? So that is where we are with this. Big questions being asked on the back of this, the governance questions, but also the precedents that this is setting. But ultimately, you must ask the question, is this in our best interest? The state was going to spend a lot of money to prosecute. That's the other side of the argument, to prosecute. Okay, so if we can recover 60% of this, in excess of 3 billion from those individuals, that can go back to show up, and then offset some of what we've sent already. Do you take it and let the individuals go, or do you continue to prosecute them? We'll ask our guests when they join us for this conversation here on PM Express. Stay with me. Appearance is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times newspaper and the Pepsodent Cavity Fighter toothpaste. Let's talk water tanks. Do you know the secret to real water storage is simple. If your tank doesn't have the tortoise on it, then it is not the correct tank. Join the Syntax Tank family today and enjoy water storage that's tough like a tortoise. 0244 335 168 to buy now or find us across the country. And you can, one of our 400 agents nationwide, you can locate them and they will help you. Go online at syntaxgh.com. A strong, a tough. And the Academic Times journal is launching soon with 3 distinctive graphic publications and a journal to showcase and empower students across all educational levels, while the journal and the tertiary one seeks to ensure that tertiary students' research makes an impact by contributing to institutional and national developments. And then, of course, tonight before you sleep, make sure to use a Pepsodent cavity fighter. Every time we eat, though, and I need to remind you, sugars are trapped between our teeth, leading to decay, gum disease, and in some cases, foul breath. Brushing your teeth every morning and night with Pepsodent cavity fighter gives your teeth the protection they need, leaving you with 10 times stronger teeth. Pepsodent, every smile matters. My guest joining me tonight is Suleiman Abraham, Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, and also an anti-corruption campaigner. Dr. Daniel Sedo is a banking and financial analyst. He's been watching this unfold very closely since the first banking sector crisis in 2017. And so he has a very, very deep understanding of what happened then. And so I'm curious to know his thoughts on the Attorney General's decision tonight. Michael Bwidi is the fundraising manager at the Transparency International Ghana and joins us. Martin Kwebu is a private legal practitioner or a lawyer, and I'm grateful that all gentlemen can join us on PM Express tonight. Dr. Daniel Sedo, let me start with you because you are the expert here in the field of banking. You follow the banking sector, collapse and the crisis very closely. So when you read that statement from the Attorney General's department that he decided that the threshold of 60% has now been reached in terms of the recovery of the more than 5 billion that we were told was lost due to the conduct of the individuals who were being tried, well, how did you react to it, knowing what you know happened at the time?
Really, I wasn't surprised because this case took us how many years? Between 7 to 8 years. We are all at pain that we have a legal system that is very slow and very painful. We've lost lives because of this whole thing. So some people will tell you it's better than nothing, but I have deeper questions to ask than telling me it's better than nothing.
What are some of the questions?
Let's appreciate the fact that banks have no money of their own. They leverage on depositors and other people's money to work. So if you take a typical bank, the money the owners put in is very small compared to what they get from other sources, largely depositors, which very often they get at no cost. Depositors put money in the bank with the understanding that there's a relationship of trust between them and the bank. Then anytime they go for their money, they will get it. But you see what has happened has created a situation where depositors could not get their money. And there was nobody to come to their rescue. That's what we are seeing. Now, when you take 60% and you can get 40%, who is going to finance that 40%? Because ultimately, the money belongs to depositors. Ultimately. So who is going to finance that? And you will see, if we deepen our discussion, you'll see that we use a certain approach to resolve the issue, and it has come back to bite us. Probably, this is not the most efficient approach we should have used. Two things. We should have probably used the approach of an investment. That is, you get people in, put money in, get stronger hands to manage the bank and get it out of the hole, turn it around, sell it, and get your money out. But the approach we have used is to throw money at it as an expense, which will never come back. And that ultimately falls on the taxpayer, which includes the depositor.
Okay. So that is a banking sector view there. And Suleiman Abraham, You listen to Dr. Daniel Sedo makes a point that it's depositors' funds that fundamentally were at stake at the time when the banking sector crisis happened. But at some point, and he also makes the point about the approach that we adopted, which, knowing our legal system, takes time. They're going to spend more money trying to prosecute this. The former government that started this pretty much haven't gone anywhere with this. You have to cut your losses at some point and see what you can recover. If you can recover 3 billion, as we've been told now has been recovered, isn't that a fair due?
Well, Evans, I would say not at all. If indeed we are talking about 5 billion, as we were told at the time, and we are talking about 3.5 billion or 3 billion, we are then left with 2 billion. As I've been arguing, if there are opportunities for people to, for example, misappropriate 1 billion, and even if in the end they are asked or they can make 900 million available and go away with 100 million Ghana cedis, I think that a lot of people will be enticed to go into such ventures where you misappropriate. If you get caught, you return. We are even talking here, I'm talking about even 90%. Here, the AG says the threshold is 60%. So you make available 60%, then you keep 40% to yourself. And that, I think, would be a very, very profitable venture. I think the element of deterrence is what we want to look at. Otherwise, we simply would say that if somebody goes to steal a plantain and the person hasn't utilized it yet, and then the person is in court, let the person return the plantain to the owner and go scot-free. And as I said in the morning, we were told about Operation Recover All Loot, not Operation Recover Some Loot or partial loot. And beyond that, I think that politically, the way this thing has been handled is quite inappropriate. If you look at the persons involved, their political background, there is no doubt, there is no question about Dr. Dufour's relationship with the NDC or as an NDC member, the current governor of the Bank of Ghana. We know, of course, he is an NDC member. If you in the morning, for example, another colleague who was on the network mentioned that Dr. Ayeni was even part of the legal or the defense team of Dr. Dufour then. I was reading a while ago, I saw my good friend Eduji Tamaklo, who was director of the NDC, legal director of the NDC, being one of the lawyers for, I think, Dufour too, or so. I saw Charles Poazum, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, and if I'm not mistaken, he is the current Upper West Regional Minister. So this is a case of NDC versus NDC. And I think that politically it ought to have even been handled properly, even if all the monies had been recovered and therefore the AG wanted to enter a nolle prosequi. I think the way things are going, if this is going to be the pattern, I doubt that we would have confidence in the reset agenda, because our country, what is really taking us back and keeping us where we are is the issue of corruption. And since 2000, almost every government that has won election has done so mainly based on the promise to fight corruption. And the NDC did so in 2024 elections. I expect it to be better rather than, the way we are going about it now.
Let me bring in Martin Kwebu. Since you talked about Operation Recover All Loot, he lawyer but also a member of that committee. Martin, whereas this particular case wasn't part of the oral scope, what do you make of the fact that it appears in this case the principle of recovering all loot wasn't applied?
Evans, I disagree that the principle wasn't applied. When I say Operation Recover All Loot, it means you recover all that you can recover. So the name of this game we are debating is evidence evidence. So yes, I take the point that Dufour has a relationship with NDC, Ayene was in the case, Eduji. I take all those points, right? Oh, perfect. You know, I mean, it's just that the time hasn't come for us to start yelling in higher decibels because there's still a lot of euphoria. I take all those points. But the point still remains that to be scientific about this, we will have to ask for more transparency. It's all about transparency. We need to see the evidence. What did Dufour offer? Maybe if they said, look, these are all of our assets, what went into it? It's only when we see what they offered and then we can show that, oh, beyond the pool of funds or assets they have these other ones stashed somewhere. Then that's when we'll begin to cry that the AG didn't do the best that he had to do. So until we get information that the Dufours didn't put forward their best offer or the AG didn't negotiate well, we cannot complain. We can't just hinge the fact that AG was in the case, that's Ayene represented one of them, Eduji was in the case, etc., to conclude that ipso facto, they deliberately chose 60% when they could have had 100. If we were to do that, it wouldn't work. So maybe, even though we've not had all of the transparency, the revelations, we can begin. And in the morning, we're on the Super Morning Show. I was on with Suleiman Abrahima, Bafwe, etc. And we all agreed that we are asking for further and better particulars. So at this stage, I would reserve further judgment, saying that the AG didn't do the best until we get the further and better particulars. And you know, in matters like this, we also mentioned in the morning that it is standard to put in a clause that, look, if you disclose a certain pool of assets, let's say you say all you have is 1 billion, and so you are offering us 800 so that you keep 200 for yourself. If later we're to find that you have other assets hidden, we will go after them. Like this popular tennis star I mentioned, Boris Becker. Boris Becker, in his bankruptcy proceedings, hid certain assets. So later on, when they found the asset, you Google it, Boris Becker hates assets in bankruptcy proceedings. When they found it, they jailed him 2.5 years. So ours, we can say that, look, if we find that beyond what you are offering, you have other assets stashed somewhere, if we're to find them in future, we will go after them and then publish what they made as an offer. And sure, over 30 million Ghanaians, if something is hidden somewhere, chances are very high that somebody would, blow the whistle. So I think we should be scientific about it. Yes, the factors we've mentioned so far are giving us cause to suspect that this is not the best deal. So if it's not the best deal, then let's ask for what? Further and better particulars. And until we get that, we shouldn't use these suspicions to conclude, because in law, there is this famous saying in a number of Supreme Court decisions that a multitude of suspicions don't constitute proof. A multitude of suspicions don't constitute proof. That's what I'll say for starters.
Michael Boydie, Martin has a point, does he not? Because he makes a point, yes, the principle is operation recover or loot, but you can only recover what you can. And it appears on the face of this, in the absence of the further and better particulars, that the AG talks about a threshold, and that is a threshold that they've managed to reach with the 60%. What's your reaction to that?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Evans. On this call, I would like to unequivocally disagree with Martin and hold a different view. And I would want to proceed by trying to understand or let people understand and use this, the principles that the AG stands for. The AG that I have come to know him, and also for the records, he was my senior colleague at ISODEC, is a very principled, fair-minded person, very objective. If I judge the AG on this, I use the AG's own principle to judge the actions that he has taken. I see a lot of gaps. Number one, why do we go into prosecution of crime? And let's say corruption is a crime. We go into prosecution of crime, one, for it to serve as deterrent for future and also for corruption, we go into it to make it a high cost and a low gain enterprise. Now we have entered nolli prosequi, which is his right, and the law backs him, so nobody is contesting that. But the law is also mindful, or common sense is mindful of the fact that it's a discretionary action, and therefore it should not be exercised unfairly. The question that everybody would ask is that, and I think Sule made a very important, the young people out there picking pockets, stealing phones, and also harvesting people's plantain. If they say that, look, I've only eaten 60% of the plantain, I've eaten 40%, I want to return the rest of the plantain, do they get the same treatment? The answer is no. I mean, how is it that somebody goes to the cooler for 10 years for stealing plantain? For all it's worth, it's just about 200 cedis. Yet the politicians get to negotiate and pay 60%. This makes it a very high gain enterprise. If I could steal $1 million, invest $1 million, get all the profit or the interest, and then come back and pay 60%, and stash away or keep the 40%, who won't get into? I mean, if there is an advertisement, I'll go into it and join the team who would do that business.
But Michael, isn't this particular case different? And hold on for me for a second, because I want to bring Daniel Sedo into that point. Daniel, this is the banking sector we are talking about. And in the banking sector, recovery is all that you do, especially when you have an asset that is in distress. Your fundamental objective is to recover as much as you can. That is what the AG has done, because you're dealing with a banking sector issue.
Yes, that is very true. Recovery is a difficult thing. And even if you take liquidation, receivership, all those processes are very difficult. And in all those processes, what it costs you even to recover is very high. And very often, at the end of the day, they realize nothing.
Yeah, so the AG has done something right here. At least he's gotten 60%.
No, it's too early in the day. Now, if we can all establish that there's nothing else to collect, then he's done well. But if we can ordinarily see some other things, then there's a lot more to do. My point really is that if the figures we are talking of, what is shown on the screen, are correct, then we are talking about 2.28 billion.
Yeah.
Who is going to pay for that? Are we going to see additional tax to pay for that?
Yeah, but that's all you can collect, right? I mean, in recovery, you have to sort of reach a point where you say you've done your best.
So the point is the preventive measures. Why do we have such a porous system and it's so easy to get these things done? This is not rocket science. Are we saying that nobody saw this coming? The supervision, are we saying we didn't see it? And if you read the stories, something happened and they were in distress and we threw additional money at them. Why didn't we stop it early? If you take our financial system as a very fragile one, and there are safety nets that we need to put in properly to prevent these things happening, why somebody else will work and save money and take it to the bank, and another person will squander it and go scot-free, and the ultimate owner of that money will die without any help? Doesn't speak well of us as a people. So we need to develop our financial system a lot more than what we are seeing.
I mean, since you talk about that, what do you make of the fact that one of the individuals who was part of the prosecution was a former BOG governor who was accused of failing in his supervisory responsibilities. He's back now as a BOG governor, and he's now obviously on the back of this arrangement been let go.
We are failing the people. The ultimate person we should be protecting is the depositor. I have ever asked a question that we know the money we've printed. Can we say that we know the amount of it in the banks? If you do that test, you see that people are not keeping money in the banks because they've lost trust. And if the banks don't have money, how do they lend to other people? So we need to go back and restructure this whole system. If somebody should ask me, I'll say, look, banks will fail. It's normal. That is who they are. But how do we safeguard people's deposits? We have what we call the Deposit Protection Corporation in its infant stages, building funds, but we never deployed it to solve any problem. It's there. What we need to do is to establish a resolution fund. Now, when you have a resolution fund and you see these things at an early stage, you move the resolution fund into that entity. Get rid of the people at the top. Get stronger hands in. Let them salvage, turn it around, make it profitable. Then you see that you are being productive. You would have saved job, you would have saved the entity. But we don't do those things. What we know to do in this country, every little thing, we throw money at it. We don't recover anything. That is our nature. We're very wasteful, not efficient, and we destroy other people's investment. And we need to start correcting ourselves, else we are going nowhere.
On that subject of recovery, Suleiman Abrahama, then also as a banking expert, an analyst, banking sector, talks about it's difficult to recover. Martin Kpebu says, recover all loot, yes, but you recover what you can. Isn't there something to be said, also considering how long it's taking for this particular trial, and it hasn't really reached anywhere in terms of conclusion? We need to, at a point, make a decision how we cut our losses, because in the end, you want restitution. It doesn't mean that you necessarily must jail somebody, but it must recover. Isn't that the ultimate focus here?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the idea is to make sure that monies misappropriated are recovered and not necessarily throwing people in jail. That again costs the country some money in terms of keeping people in jail. If yesterday's statement had said that at this stage we've recovered all that we believe can be recovered from the persons involved, and going forward we'll keep track in the event that we discover any other thing, we would make sure that it is recovered or it is added, that will be getting us closer to something that could be satisfactory. Indeed, it is not just about what was misappropriated. It's also about interest, because, again, if I'm allowed to misappropriate 1 billion for 2 years or 3 years, and if I'm caught at that time and I'm willing to return the 1 billion and keep whatever profit that I would have made, I don't think that is the kind of system that we would want to build.
But I ask the question again. I know that example has been given, but isn't this different because you're dealing with the banking sector? It's not the same, right, with other sort of crimes.
No, I don't think there's any difference at all, because it is not just about the money involved. It's also about the assets. So if I had that money and I built 10 houses out of it, and then today you ask me and I return the money, do I own the 10 houses or I don't own the 10 houses? And don't forget, I think there's a question about who pays that 2 billion. I think we have to remind ourselves that under the previous administration, we were told that the state, our money, 21 billion Ghana cedis, has been spent on the banking sector cleanup. In other words, what it means is that the state used the taxpayers' money, the monies that we borrow, that you and our children's children will come and pay to settle these monies that we are told people misappropriated. And yet, here we are being told we are recovering 60 or so percent, and we think we've done enough and all of that. Again, I think it's also about how it's been handled. And that for me is very, very, very serious. As I said earlier, if you think of it that this Attorney General was the person who was actually defending Dr. Dufo and saying that the charges that have been preferred against him are misconceived, cannot be, and to quote one report, he says the charges are misconceived, erroneous, without any legal basis. I want the court to take a critical look at the charges and, if possible, dismiss them. This is one of the sittings in court, Dr. Dominic Ayeni's words. And you look at the statement that was issued yesterday on paragraph 5, it says that the decision, however, does not imply an absence of wrongdoing, nor a vindication of any conduct. So what are we being told? Is it the case that, well, they did no wrong, but, well, some monies were involved or some assets were involved, they've returned them? The same AG is telling us that the decision that they've made does not imply absence of wrongdoing or a vindication of any conduct. So obviously there is a problem. But I heard you in the introductory remarks say that they are going to do a press conference or something to that effect.
Yeah, on Monday, we've been told.
Yes. I think we can look forward to that press conference and hope that we'll be told that they will be told about how much has been recovered, whether that was all that they could recover, or once they hit the 60% mark, they realize that, okay, we've achieved our target, whatever is left, let's allow it to go. I look forward to the press conference and what will be said. But otherwise, at this stage, I think that this is a no-no.
I mean, Michael, with you on the transparency question, though, here is an Attorney General who has decided that although I am not obliged to explain why I'm filing nolle prosequi on the particular case, I'm going to do so. I mean, nolle prosequi are his prerogative, and he does it, and he owes nobody any explanation. But he's chosen to issue a statement to tell us why he is taking this course of action. Isn't that something? And then we're also told that he's going to be addressing the press, and he will give us a bit more on this. Isn't that at least, and I know one of you make the point about this is not a resetting that we voted for, at least, isn't that a change, at least some accountability to all of us?
Well, I think it is in sync with his nature. He's generally a very objective person. So for me, it won't come as a surprise. But the question is, how is he using the objectivity in public office? That's the question we need to ask. Look, 2 weeks ago, we were in the Ashanti region, met about 100 citizens groups and trade unions and stuff like that. And in all the conversation, what everybody seems to say is that, look, the law never gets to its majesty. It said that when the law in its majesty forbids the king and the pauper from sleeping at the park. But you and I know that the king would never sleep at the park. It's always going to be the pauper. So the law technically targets the pauper. So we know that, look, when it comes to political figures and when it comes to popular individuals, they would get, a handshake, a pat at the back. The law would not go its 9 miles, and eventually they would be asked to pay something small. And this had come to, in all fairness, to frustrate the fight against corruption a lot more. It is going to entrench apathy a lot more, and it's going to send a very wrong signal that, look, you just need to be. Well, let's look at also a bit of a history, our recent history. Almost all the nolle prosequi that the current AG had entered have been people of a certain political stock. Isn't that curious? I think I would leave that for all of us to judge. It's so the issue about transparency, we will clap for him. But for somebody like me who knows him very well, it is his nature. He is generally very objective and fair-minded. He would put the issue out there as it is. But the question is it the right thing? Did he do the right thing in this instance? Well, let us look at the the substance of the issue. Let us look at the implication the decision is taking, going to have on the long-term fight against corruption, the long-term management of public resources. That is what is key. I mean, we are all staying up tonight to discuss this thing because every one of us believe that it could have been better. The reason cited, I mean, as we're all saying, if he had cited the reason that that's all that we could recover, we can't literally draw water out of stone. This is all we can get. It is a better sell than to tell us that a 60% peg or recovery decision had been made that, you know, when we recover 60%, is the person is good to go. What informed the 60%? Why not 50? Why not 70? Why not 100? And the question that everybody is asking,
if you look at the wording,
the 40?
Yeah, if you look at the wording of that particular paragraph, it says the AG's department together with other institutions. So this is not something that the AG itself, or it didn't disclose which other institutions, AG itself came to. It's something that was done with a consultative arrangement that came to the 60%. They must have done a bit more to arrive at that 60%. It didn't sound to me like it was arbitrary.
Yeah, unfortunately, Evans, Article 88.3 gives prosecutorial power to the AG and nobody else. All the other institutions are either exercising delegatory powers. So therefore, the buck stops with the AG. So if all the others agree that we should peg it at 60%, it doesn't absolve the AG of the questions that we are asking. And we have to ask him again, why 60? Why not 70? Why not 80 or 100? Why 60? Who pays for the rest of the 40?
I mean, Martin, there's a question about the propriety of the approach, which is the choice of a nolle prosequi. This matter was before court. If the AG's view is that I want to pursue the path of recovery, why didn't he do this before the court? Because you remember, in the case of Michael Asian, there was an arrangement that it was reached with the court for him to make payments over time and even give him a schedule. Why didn't the AG pursue that course? That would have still been before a court of competent jurisdiction.
All right, so Evans, great question. So we still come back to more transparency on what went into the decision. So you see where I said we are shooting from the hip, we are shooting in the dark when we've not asked for more evidence to be able to do a scientific analysis. Yes, because he is a professional as well, and others will be within their rights to presume that looking at everything, he thought that he didn't have enough to win that case. Let's not forget there is context. There is a Japa tape where Godfrey Dami was on tape confessing that it's Akufo-Addo and Ofori-Atta finance minister who were on his neck to continue prosecuting Atuforsen and Japa. There is a tape admitted into evidence. I can tell you that this case also has the same kind of spectacle, that it was meant basically to get at political opponents. It was just, look, Dufour is a big NDC financier. So if they could humiliate him and then also, you know, do everything to bring him down, that would be cutting oxygen from NDC. Let's not hide this. So this prosecution in the first place had a huge element of a political witch hunt. Look, Evans, I'm sure all of us on this panel are familiar with the principle of too big to fail.
Yeah.
Where were we when the subprime mortgage issues happened in the US, 2008? Where were we? Too big to fail. Yes, people will say in the capitalist system, you socialize the losses and then privatize the profits, etc. But Obama had no option. He looked at it. You see Goldman Sachs. You saw Bears and Stearns, my favorite, Merrill Lynch, etc. They all had to suffer, right? But they didn't deal with them in such a way that they had to collapse them, yank their licenses. What was worse than the subprime mortgage thing that happened in the US? It appears, you see, as I said, we are shooting from the hip. We just want to castigate. We don't seem to put it in a global perspective that, look, business comes at a certain risk, but there's also the principle of too big to fail. There comes a time you will catch big businesses that are involved in crime, but if you look at the cascading effect on jobs, etc., you don't kill them, please. I think there's too much of, we are looking at this in a very narrow manner, in a manner that's how we will kill all our businesses in the name of, yes, we want to fight crime. But it's interesting, when we're following the Japa case and we didn't get a farthing, I don't know, Sule, what was your comment when we ended up not getting a farthing in the Japa case? Look, Big C said here, 2-point-something million euros. We walked away from 2-point-something million euros and said, oh, go after listen, Atuforsen and Japa, go after Atuforsen and Japa. We ended up with zero. We ended up with zero. Haven't we learned a lesson? Look, let's not also underestimate the humiliation the Dufour family is suffering from this. This is forever. Forever, their names are gone. So that is also deterrent enough. When we talk about deterrence, deterrence is not always spending time in jail and in Sawam. In actual fact, when it comes to accountability, it's broader than a jail term. So we don't need a conviction before we say somebody is being held accountable. By returning the money, that is accountability. If they hadn't done anything wrong, why are they paying us money? So that is it. It speaks for itself. And their reputation is gone. The Dufour can't be the business mogul that he once was. Dufour II, his son, won't have the same stature, the same respect, etc. So I think that, as I've said, let's reserve further judgment and continue to push that IUNI should come out with further and better particulars, okay? So that in case they are hiding anything, then we'll go for the Boris Becker example. If they hide anything and we find out, there will be a clause in the agreement that anything we find that they've hidden, we will go after it. I think that will be fair. Then corporate Ghana will continue to make progress. If we overemphasize deterrence, we will end up short, like we ended up short in the Japa case. Japa and Atuforsen, we ended up short. We didn't get one farthing. Please, let's learn something from it.
I mean, Sule, you agree?
Absolutely not. I think that I somehow even struggle to get a consistency in some of the things that Martin is putting out. In one breath, he says that the Dufour case is akin to what was happening in the Japa case, where there was a thinking that Dufour is a big financier, let's go after him, and all of that. And then in another breath, he says, if they did nothing wrong, why are they paying the money? So in the first instance, it's almost to suggest that they just went after Dufour because of political reasons. And then you conclude by then saying, if they did nothing wrong, why are they paying the money? And of course, the AG's statement yesterday in paragraph 5 makes that point, that the decision made is not to say that there was no wrongdoing. I don't think that anybody would say, well, they didn't also say that there was wrongdoing. They didn't just end it there, and to say that this is also not about a vindication of any conduct. We are not talking here also about collapsing an existing Unibank. Unibank has already been merged into the consolidated bank. So it's not as though we are saying the bank is still operating. Let's do whatever it is to collapse the bank and then suffer the job losses and so on. Unibank is already gone into consolidated bank, just as the other ones. And we've already spent 21 billion. If what the government put out last year and the years before is anything to go by, we've spent 21 billion of state money to make sure that people who lost their monies were somehow compensated. Don't forget that the previous government continuously said even the banking sector cleanup was one of the reasons why the economy was suffering, as a result of which they had to do haircuts, people lost their monies, people died and all of that. I don't want to believe that I think we were where we were because of the huge corruption under that government and the mismanagement and all of that. But like I said, perhaps we should wait for Monday and hear what the AG has to say in terms of convincing us that they could only retrieve what they got, and what they got, how much is it? We need to know. And of course, do the necessary interrogation to be satisfied that it wasn't a case of conflict of interest, and the defender of the defender of the accused, now being in a position of being the prosecutor, really doesn't know, how do I defend the person? How do I prosecute the person I used to defend and say there was no case? I think it's a very complex situation, and they should have handled it in a better way.
I mean, the Martin makes a point that I want to throw in here, because for many, this is really at the heart of what we are seeing unfold. It is a politicization of state policy and economic management. As far as this banking sector is concerned, the issue about the way the previous government approached this, there's some and many who thought in fact, Dr. Settle makes a point about the approach that was adopted at the time. Instead of putting people in charge who can turn it around and sell it and make profit, they decided to collapse it. And there are many who said the agenda was a partisan political one. You listen to the folks like Dr. Indum, whose bank also was collapsed. He said something at the time. I want to read that and put that to Dr. Sedo about, and all of you can weigh in on that question about politicization. And if it was politicized then, why are we surprised that the politicians in charge now with a different government are approaching it differently? Indum said, quote, that thing, that is, when he said that thing, he was referring to the collapse of the GM Bank, was deliberate, carefully, purposefully concocted. And the people who did it, they know who they are, and those who are involved in it, I will mention their names. So everybody knows that because some people deliberately decided that they would collapse GM Bank. It goes on to say, politics may be part of it, but it is more people's selfish interest. They wanted to get some of us off the scene so that they could be in charge of the financial sector in Ghana. That is Dr. Papakwesi Indum talking here. Dr. Sedo, isn't that really why we are where we are? That instead of approaching this problem at the time with a professional eye, as you have suggested, which is appoint a new set of leaders to turn the banking sector around, or those banks that are struggling around, and find a way to save the banks, we decided to go after some of these banks and collapse it. Indum says it was politics. The NDC folks who were there at the time, and before we know his leanings, also thought this was political. So why are we surprised? Isn't it really at the heart of the problem?
No, we need to appreciate the fact that banking is heavily regulated. And that is done for good reason. Because like I said earlier, it's highly geared, meaning they take other people's money to work. So the regulation supervision is about making sure the bank is run properly to protect depositors' interests. So what we should be doing is to make sure that the regulatory system functions without politics. Because if the regulatory system is functioning properly, they will detect these things.
But is the Ghana regulatory system one that is independent of political control? I guess that's where the problem is.
Exactly so. Exactly so. So we need to take the politics out of that. Set up your bank. If you're doing well, you're properly regulated, there's no problem. But if you set up your bank and you don't do things properly, there are challenges. When people step in, we can interpret it with the politics. Truly, the politics is hurting all of us. If you look at our financial system generally, and you try to track transactions and where the failings are, you see where it ends. It ends in politics. Because you hear politicians say, oh, we've given it to him because he is resourceful. Resourceful means go to the banks, borrow, and refuse to pay. Or you do the work, the payment delays. You're unable to pay. There's default. Then you create problem for the bank. When the regulators try to move in, probably somebody says, hey. So we've created problem for ourselves. We need to take politics out of many of the things we do if we want to make progress.
And Doc, I need to ask you this. If
Yes.
it's true that the Dufours and those involved in this particular case are now ready to give back to the state $3 billion plus, if the approach back then was to say, obviously, then it means they have $3 billion to give back to the state. Wouldn't $3 billion have saved the bank then? Because if they could pay $3 billion today back to the state, they certainly could have afforded $3 billion to put back into the bank to save it at the time. Couldn't they have done that then?
Yes, that is why I would have opted for getting people in to save the bank. So with that, you recover whatever you can recover, put in additional money, and then turn it around. Now, where did the money go? You can trace these things.
Yeah.
If we mean to recover sincerely, we can trace these things. And for them to even be able to bring back something, it means the money was sitting somewhere.
Yeah, and it begs the question. I mean, that's such a fascinating thought. It begs the question, were they even given the opportunity to explore that option at the time?
So it's the approach we adopted. Again, I don't think we've perfected the act of resolution in banking in this country. We have not. So when things happen, our approach is to collapse it, throw people out. But that is not the best way. If we had engaged them, probably, and say, bring these things, maybe. What we are even talking about currently, a figure has been thrown at us. We don't know whether it's cash or it's other assets.
Assets, yeah.
Meanwhile, what we are looking for is a liquidity.
Yeah.
So we may even be running into bigger problems of realizing if there are other assets, maybe landed properties, we may be running into problem how to realize those landed properties. Because we know ourselves in this country, once you know where it is coming from, nobody will be interested in buying them.
And Michael Boydie, the same question to you, because I wanted to get to the fundamentals, the heart of the problem, maybe, which is why we are now talking about this outcome that I know you're criticizing. But if you strip it off to the genesis of this, if they can now give back to the state $3 billion, assuming that's what it is, because 60% of $5 billion is around there, why weren't they asked to do so at the time to save the bank? So we avoid spending all the money that we spent, at least on the Unibank question. I mean, what do you make of that possibility then?
Well, Evans, let me start from the argument of politicization.
Yes.
Let us agree and let us here say that every public policy has an underlying political interest. There is what we call the rational choice theory. It underlines every public policy. Now, I mean, people weigh the cost benefits of decisions. Now, as to whether the choices that people make or the decisions were made capriciously or selfishly or personal interest is another thing that we need to debate. Let's also look at the issues carefully. Indum is in the same bracket, but was not prosecuted. That shows that perhaps Indum did not commit a crime warranting prosecution. So let's not paint them with the same brush. Now, if we take, assuming that we go the route of our senior doc here, that we could have handled it differently rather than liquidating, let's go that route. It doesn't absolve the individuals who perhaps may have engaged in wrongdoing, occasioning the loss from prosecution. So we could have handled the banks differently, save jobs, keep probably save resources that we threw at it, and probably recover some money. But it will not take away the fact that if people mishandle state resources, people engage in wrongdoing, they must face the law. They are facing the law not because it is one political individual or party that is prosecuted, but crime is crime, irrespective of whom is in the helm of affairs. So I think when we distinguish we disaggregate the issues, we'll be able to deal with it a lot better. Now, if Mr. Dufour or Dr. Dufour had 3 billion at the time, let's also not forget that perhaps 3 billion at the current 3 billion is not the same time value of money. At
But
that time,
I guess the time value of money means that then it would have probably been worth more.
Exactly. So, and then also he could have invested it, make more interest, and now paying off the 3 billion is a lot easier for him. We also don't know whether he paid the 3 billion over a period of time. But so perhaps he didn't pay it at a go, he spread it over a period of time, which means that even if whatever he had at the time of prosecution was not enough, was not substantial enough to save him.
But I guess the question I ask is, and circling back to a political partisan question, is was he offered the chance to raise the funding of 3 billion at the time to put him back? And then you hear those who say, well, the objective then was just to collapse the bank for partisan political purposes, and so he was not even giving a hearing on that subject at all. That is really at the heart of why this has become a political.
I don't buy that argument. Sorry to say, I don't buy that argument. There are remedies. If you think that you've been prosecuted unfairly, you could file or you could sue for malicious prosecution. So I don't think that, look, the issue about politicization of the prosecution is the issue. Let's also not forget that plea bargain is part of our laws now. The Special Prosecutors Law and other pieces of legislation allows for plea bargain. So therefore, he could have offered. So it's not about the prosecution only asking him to pay, but he could also have offered. So it's a two-way street. Negotiation could have ensued. We have alternative resolution mechanisms in our laws. So there are ways which we could have handled this. I think that reading the politics in it makes it a lot difficult to A, learn the lessons therein, 2, for others who perhaps may be tempted to go that same route to be scared. They think that, well, if this is profitable and if this is possible, let's go that route, read politics in it, and get sympathy. I think that we should discount the politicization of it. If it is in it, the question is, like we all say, witch hunting. If there are no witches, there should not be any hunter. We should not hunt them. I mean, was there a crime committed, or was there? And if there was no crime, why is payment being made? And if the crime had been committed, then what does the law say? Is the prosecution malicious? If it's not, or if it is, then Mr. Dufour has all the competent lawyers at his disposal. He should sue for it. But if it's not, then we are still back to the same question. Who pays for the 40% left?
Let me ask Martin, though, on that point. Because also, Martin, politics or not, partisan considerations or not, innocent civilians lost money at the height of the banking sector crisis then. For those who lost money, you think this is justice?
Well, Evans, yes. Justice, because at least by closing the case in this manner, would have recovered something. Let's not forget, the state paid them in advance, right? And so this money, well, I'm not aware if some people are still making claims. If they are, then when this money is paid, it means that those people too can be paid. So it's justice. As I keep saying, Evans, I'll never move from the point that we are shooting from the hip. Until we push for all the facts, it will be totally, it's like putting the cart before the horse. You've not been given all the facts. How do you make a conclusion that somebody has been lackadaisical, kukwasa? I mean, no. You can't say kukwasa. You don't have all the facts. Shooting from the hip. Take your time. Like we said, let's do it in unison, okay? Or lockstep. AG, bring us all the facts. AG, bring us all the facts. Then we can scrutinize. Just see us all over the place running ahead of ourselves.
But Martin, on that point, though, the AG chose to do something pretty unique. he was not mandated to do so. He was not obliged. But he decided that I'm filing on the protocol and I'm going to explain to the public. When he chose to do that, it was incumbent on him to give us the full facts. But he hasn't, at least not yet.
Good. But nothing also stops us from pushing him for more. This is Ghana. We all know that, look, at least we are evolving as a citizen, as a more conscious society. We are holding politicians more and more to account. You look at the fight against Galamsey. Who knew that this day would come where citizens will be briefing down the necks of various governments, right? And I can show you, Itiwa Forest, Ekufuado wanted to mine bauxite there. We went to court. We knew we would lose. But how many years on, is the public that saved the Itiwa Forest? They said, no, there will be no mining in any forest. So I see our society evolving. I think that rather than us casting aspersions, etc., let it be a simple message. Dr. Ayine and Dr. Srensai, we require further and better particulars. When we get that, then we proceed. But all the statements that show they've not done enough, etc., they are not scientific. You can't give the man a hearing. You haven't seen all the facts. You can't arrive at a conclusion that this is not the best deal. To be honest, no, that's not on. This is not scientific. We have to proceed one step at a time. Ask for information. It's when he denies you information, then maybe you can even make inferences from that. But this is the first step. He's brought something, at least by moving our democracy forward. And Evans, you asked that question. Even though we all hail Ayine for explaining reasons for nolle prosequi, there was this program where Godfrey Dami cited an example of a case where he also gave an explanation for a nolle prosequi. So he's seeking to say that this is not the first time. But I'm sure we all agree that Ayene's own is the more comprehensive and it's enduring because he's going to continue doing it. But Godfrey Dami claims he's the first to have explained. Perhaps it's even possible if we go into our history, we will find that other attorney generals also explain. Yeah? So Evans, the message should be simple. Everything we are saying boils down to the fact that we are asking for more information. Please, until we get that, scrutinize same and see shortcomings, we have no business and we have no legitimate right to start making aspersions that this is not a good deal, this is celebratory soft justice. That's what I see. It's just, okay, Dufour is a big guy, he's close to the NDC, ipso facto, he's getting a sweetheart deal. We can't continue to run Ghana like that. Ask for information. If it doesn't come, make adverse inferences. If it comes, then we can analyze and then move forward. Let's always think about tomorrow, because today I see how we are all complaining, no, this is bad. I keep asking that, so when we lost the money, the Japa case, the big C, 2.something million euro, what did we say? Some of the people now on this panel, I wish I'd had the opportunity to Google to see, what did we say a few months ago? Ekufuado was running us roughshod. So a lot of people kept quiet. Now today, at least Ayine is making efforts to recover something, and we are all like, no, it should be 200%. I'm like, were we in this country when the Japan money, we lost everything, not €1. I want to see what people say. I mean, come on, let's be consistent. You know, sometimes you see, in times like what we faced last year, right? Those who kept quiet, they've lost the moral right to speak. So today, when I see people now getting up, no, this is a bad deal, this, I'm like, oh, a few months ago, there was a classical one, the Japan case. What did this person say? Once I didn't see, we were at the forefront saying that was bad. And today, I can equally talk about this. People who kept quiet last year, suddenly today can say anything they want. But please, the public, you know, are very discerning. You know, the public keep records of such things. Yes, they keep a record. They are always asking that, this person saying this today, what did he say last year when we lost such money? What did he say? A tape that said that an attorney general says the president of the republic, Ekufuado, and finance minister Ofuriata are on his neck to do a persecution. We are due money, yet the attorney general refuses that money and continues with the prosecution. I can count the voices that spoke against this when we lost that money. But today, it looks like these people, they are fair shot. People are taking pot shots at them. I think we should be consistent.
And I know that Sule was very consistent on that point
Absolutely.
too,
Yes.
under the
Sule,
previous government.
I can remember.
Yeah, and Sule, to you though, on the point that Martin makes about getting further and better particulars. I mean, I know that the fourth estate, which obviously is something that you manage, you exercise your right on the Right to Information Act to exact information from state agencies. Is this something, if the press conference comes about and you're not satisfied, is this something that you are willing, ready to activate the laws to get clarity on through a formal process?
Absolutely. I think it is not about me. It is about the Ghanaian people. And I should also say that I have nothing against Dr. Dufour and the people who were involved in this matter. It is about the state and the country that we want to build. Now, having said that, it is also important that we don't make it sound as if we are having this discussion on the basis of speculation. This discussion we are having is not on the basis of speculation. It is on the basis of information that the Attorney General has put out. So let us not make it sound as if we don't know anything, we have heard rumors, and we are waiting for Monday. No, the Attorney General has put out information, and I'm very, very sure that as of yesterday when they were putting out this information, this is what they thought Ghanaians must know about the case. It is only after we are interrogating it that perhaps this demand about there is a need for more information, better and further and better particulars and so on and so forth, which I endorse, that we need to know more because this is a very, very complex case. And so, yes, we need more information, but let us not also put this as if we are discussing speculation or we are discussing rumors. We are discussing what the Attorney General has put out. He says that there's a threshold established. If they are able to recover 60% of the money, that is fine. And they've recovered, what is 60% or more. And on that basis, they are discontinuing the case. And the discontinuance of the case is not to say that there was no wrongdoing, or is not to say that there is vindication for any conduct. This is not me saying, this is the Attorney General saying. In other words, they are saying it is not as if the people did no wrong, or we are not saying that we are vindicating them. So I think it is important to point out, Martin, that we are not having this conversation on the basis of rumors. We are having this conversation on the basis of information that the Attorney General has put out. We are only saying the information put out is not satisfactory, and we need more explanation. And that is what we are looking forward to, whatever that can be added. The other points that were raised earlier about whether they couldn't have been asked to bring the 3 billion
then, yeah,
that we are talking about, I think it's a bit unrelated, because the other dimension of that would be, couldn't the previous government spend the 21 billion that they claimed they spent to save the banks? If you have that money as a state, to do banking sector cleanup, why don't you use that same money to ensure that the banks become solvent, so that the staff there wouldn't be dismissed, as we later discovered a number of them driving Uber and so on and so forth.
That is why people suggest that is why people suggest there was a political agenda behind the decision to collapse the banks.
Well, I mean, that is for all of us to prove that. If the Attorney General had said, look, we have established that this was a political agenda, Unibank was solvent, Dufour and the others did no wrong, there is no way we can prosecute them and get conviction, and we wouldn't want to waste our time, and therefore we've entered nolle prosequi, I don't think that we would have been having this conversation. But it is the same Attorney General who says we've recovered a certain portion of the money, and we are discontinuing. It doesn't mean that they have not done anything wrong. So certainly they are telling us that there was wrongdoing. We are not vindicating them. We have a threshold. We've gotten to that threshold. The rest of it, should go. So the politics of it, by the same people who belong to the same political camp, telling us that, well, there was something wrong, we have no basis to say that it was a political decision. If it was a political decision, they have whatever it takes to convince Ghanaians that, look, per the investigations we've done, the files we've reviewed, this was a clearly politically motivated prosecution, and there is no way we're going to be able to convict anybody. And in that case, people would have even said, well, this is in conformity with Dr. Ayeni and the other defense team when they were saying the case is frivolous, there's no, any crime committed, and so on and so forth. That would have been very consistent with what they said. But here now, we are being told, at that time when they were saying there was nothing wrong, indeed there was something wrong, except that we've made some recoveries. And that is why I say it's a very, very contentious matter, a bit of conflict of interest here and there, politicization here and there, and the Attorney General has a responsibility to convince Ghanaians that he is truly serving the interests of the public on this matter in the way and manner they've gone by it.
Michael, very briefly, what do you want to see to get closure as far as this matter is concerned?
I think that as we sit here, there's nothing we can do. We just would wait and hear from the AG on Monday. But one of the things that we hope the AG will be telling us is the fact that there is a caveat somewhere that in the event where there is a possibility of retrieving or recovering more, they would go at it. Perhaps it will be a bit more comforting. But the way things stand now, I think that it leaves a lot more to desire.
Okay. And Michael, thank you very much. And gentlemen, I'm grateful. We look forward to this news conference next week on the subject. Enjoy the rest of your evening.